Hi, everyone. Our guest today is Mr. Jack Canfield. Jack is the New York Times #1 best-selling author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. He has built a billion-dollar brand and has sold over 500 million books worldwide. Without further ado to say, let us bring on Mr. Jack Canfield. Jack, thank you so much for your time today. I know you started as a high school teacher. How did you go from that to writing the Chicken Soup for the Soul?
Well, I was doing workshops in the, I started in the classroom teaching African American history and American history to mostly Black kids in the school, and they were very unmotivated. And so I noticed whenever I was telling them a story about anything, my life, a person in African American history, they paid real close attention. And whenever I was teaching a historical fact or a treaty or something, they were looking out the window. So I really very quickly realized stories help people pay attention, they mean something, and it velcros the principles you're teaching in the story to the mind. So then I got invited to start teaching other teachers because my kids were doing better than anyone in the school. And I started using stories there. And then I was running around the country teaching, training teachers everywhere. And people started coming up to me and saying, that story you told about the Girl Scout who sold 3,000 boxes of Girl Scout cookies in 1 year, a story about the one-legged guy who climbed Mount Everest, is that in a book anywhere? My daughter needs to read it. My son needs to read it. My sales staff needs to be motivated by it. And so I realized as I was coming home on a plane from Boston to Los Angeles at the time, I probably had about 69 stories that I knew.
Wow.
And so I just wrote them all down, kind of gave them stupid titles, And then I thought, well, I'm going to write 2 a week. And so I spent a year writing 2 stories a week. One I'd write Monday through Wednesday, then I went Thursday through Saturday, and then I would take Sunday off, and then I would revisit them and edit them about a week later as I was writing 2 more new stories. So basically over the course of a year, I probably had about 70 or 80 stories written when I met Mark Victor Hansen, my co-author, at a breakfast. We knew each other, but we ended up at this breakfast. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm writing this book. And he said, well, what's it about? And I told him all these stories. And he said, I want to write it with you. And I said, Mark, I've got 70 stories. I'm 3/4 of the way through. Why would I let you do that? He says, you got to have 101. It's a sacred number in Asia. And I said, okay, well, if you can get 31 more stories, we'll do it. And he did. So that's how the book came to be. And then, as you probably know the story, it took us, I think, about a year and a half to sell the book. No one wanted to buy it. They thought it was a stupid title. And, people don't read short stories and so forth. But eventually we did. And that's how it started to evolve. But that's how I went from literally learning the value of stories as a teacher and then starting to use them in my work. And then everyone saying, are those stories in a book?
Wow. Jack, I know you're a big believer in intuition. And how did you come with the name Chicken Soup for the Soul anyway?
Well, basically, we were about to take the book to New York with an agent and try to sell it to a bunch of different publishers. And we didn't have a title. And the agent said, you have to have a title. So Mark and I agreed that we would meditate every day for a week for at least an hour and just sit in the space of let's ask a higher power for a title. And on the 3rd day, it was a Wednesday, I remember it very clearly, Sunday morning, and this chalkboard appeared in my mind and a hand came out and wrote chicken soup.
Wow. And
I said to the hand, what does chicken soup have to do with my book? And it said, when you were sick, your grandmother gave you chicken soup as a kid, to heal. Because in America, chicken soup is like antiviral and everyone says, oh, you need some chicken soup. So I said, but this is not a book about sick people. And the voice in my head, I assumed it was God, who knows, said, people's spirits are sick. They're living in resignation, hopelessness, and fear. There was a huge recession going on. There was a war going on in the Gulf. A lot of people had lost their jobs. And I thought chicken soup for the spirit, and that didn't work. I thought chicken soup for the soul, and I got goosebumps. So I called Mark, he got goosebumps. My wife got goosebumps. Went to New York, talked to 21 different publishers over 3 days. Nobody got goosebumps. So basically, the book was turned down by 144 publishers before we got a publisher over the course of about a year and a half. But then when we came out with it, a whole bunch of people got goosebumps. So I think we now have about 500 million copies of Chicken Soup for the Soul books in 47 languages around the world in print.
Wow. So when was the first book published, Jack?
1993.
1993. And it took you 14 months to reach the bestseller list, right?
Yeah, basically, as I said, whenever you come out with a book, you think it's going to take off, and it didn't. And we came up with this rule of 5, where we said if we do 5 things every day to promote the book, eventually this book will sell. And we had talked to a spiritual guy who said, you know, imagine you go to a tree with an axe, and every day you took 5 whacks at the tree with the axe, even the largest tree in the world would eventually have to come down. So every day we would call 5 newspapers, we'd call 5 radio stations, 5 television stations, 5 magazines, 5 bookstores. Are you carrying our book? And it was 14 months before we hit the Washington Post. We were number 14. And then it climbed up to number 1 over the course of several months. It hit the New York Times, climbed up to number 1.
Wow.
And then it stayed there for 3 years, number 1 in the New York Times.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, Jack, the last book we collaborated on was Authentic Power and Greatness, this book.
Right.
You gave some amazing insights into finding your purpose of life. And today's world, how do we find our purpose in life anyway, for most people?
Well, first, I think everyone has to believe you have a purpose. I think everyone's born with a purpose. Some people know very quickly, like they just know they want to play music. They know they want to be an athlete. You see these little kids I have a nephew who's 3, who carries around a baseball bat and a wiffle ball all day long. He only wears baseball uniforms. If you put him in something else, he cries. So it's clear he knows what he wants to do. And then there are other people that are not quite so sure. And I think the thing you have to do is start to look at, I look at 3 ways to come up with your purpose. Number 1, what lights you up? What makes you come alive? And so I tell the story in my book about Julie Carrier, who was at Ohio State University, and she wanted to be a veterinarian because she loved animals. But when she got there, everything was about anatomy and biology and, you know, biochemistry, things she hated really. And so she was miserable. And one day she sat down and she asked herself, what do I really love? What makes me happy? And she thought it was leadership. Every time she was in a leadership role, she was happy. And so she thought back, you know, high school leadership. I was president of the senior class. She was the head of her sorority. And so she decided to major in leadership, which they didn't even have a program in leadership. But she managed to cobble together a bunch of courses and convince the university to give her a degree in leadership. At the age of 21, she got a job in the Pentagon teaching leadership to the American military. She ended up marrying a graduate of West Point, our military academy. And later she went on to found a foundation for women and girls, and she goes around teaching people how to set goals and believe in themselves and lead. And so that's one way, is just to look back. I call it your joy review. Think of, when were you happiest? What were you doing? And is there a way you can make a living at that? I wrote a story recently about a woman who lives in Hawaii. She loves to surf. And you think, well, unless you're a competitive surfer, which she wasn't in terms of like world class getting sponsors, how do you make a living in surfing? And what she did is she realized that how you do anything is how you do everything. And so she started bringing these women executives out and teaching them how to surf. And she noticed if they waited too long for the wave, they did that same thing in business. They never saw the trends coming, so they missed the trends. If they got too far out on the board tips over because there's not enough weight in the back. So sometimes people get too far ahead of their staff, their company. And so she started running these seminars, charging executive women from big companies $10,000 per week, come surf on the, you know, she spends her whole life in a bikini on the beach, making $50,000, $60,000 a week surfing. So it's possible to take your passion and turn it into a business if you're really willing to do that. The second thing I teach people is to go inside, close your eyes, ask for anything that might represent a higher power. It could be an angel. It could be, if you're a Christian, Jesus. It could be Buddha. But you bring that person into your mind. And I always have people go to the top of a mountain. You're hearing a plane fly over, like if we were at the top of a mountain. But anyway, what happens is that if you visualize that, this being of wisdom, then you can ask them the question, what is my purpose? And give me a gift, a physical gift. And I've seen people receive pens because they were supposed to write, hearts because they were supposed to teach love. Someone would give them a children's book because they were supposed to write children's books. So that's a very powerful way to go into a very deep way to do it. And then finally, we have in my book, the Success Principles, and also in my workbook, the Success Principles workbook, there's what I call the paper and pencil approach. You ask yourself, what are 2 qualities that you most love to express in the world? And what are 2 ways you most love to express them? So mine are love and joy. I love to inspire people. I love to empower people. And then if you were thinking of the world as perfect, according to you, what would be happening? Well, to me, everyone will be living their highest vision. And so my purpose becomes using my, empowering and inspiring people to live their highest vision in a context of love and joy, which is what I do. It's my books do that. My seminars do that. I'm doing it with you right now. So that's really what my purpose is. And anybody can go through that little exercise and come up with their purpose.
Wonderful, wonderful. For a person, just say he found his purpose, his or her purpose, how do you turn that into a living? I know you explained that before, but practically, like in a series of steps, what then they go through in their mind that they can turn this into a process and making a living?
Well, it depends on what it is, obviously. I mean, if you love to play the piano, you could do concerts, you can teach piano, you could, do something where you go into parties and play for people, you could work in a bar. I mean, playing the piano, lots of things you could do with that would generate money. One of my friends loves to travel. So how do you make money traveling? Well, she hooked up with one of these cruise ships that takes kids around the world as a semester at sea. And she's a docent, a teacher on that cruise ship. She also, when she's not on that, she'll tell people, give your kids to me for the summer. I'll take them to Greece. I'll take them to China, whatever. And she provides them with an educational experience. And it's paid for by other people because she loves to travel. Another person I know loves television sitcoms and not sitcoms, what do you call them? Daytime television, where they have these programs that go on and on that never end. After 10 years, you're still wondering if the doctor's going to marry the person. And so anyway, she loved to watch those. She thought, well, how can I make a living? These soap operas are called. And she started something called the Soap Opera Digest, which allows her to watch soap operas all day long. And then she writes up what happened for people who missed them that week. And you can buy it at the supermarket. You can subscribe to it. And she makes a living watching soap operas. I know another person who loves to hang out with movie stars. And so she started an interview show, originally online, and now it's on TV, where she gets to interview movie stars all day long. So there's ways to do it. I mean, each way you want to do it requires maybe something a little different, a little more creative. But the reality is, if you love doing something, someone else loves it as well. You could create a community of people. For example, I created something called the Transformational Leadership Council, which are all people that teach this work I do. And there was no professional association for those people. So like an AMA for doctors or American Psychology Association for psychologists. So I created an organization. We've got people from about 20 countries that belong to it. We meet twice a year in exotic locations. We have a whole staff that supports it, and people pay dues to belong to it. So I can get paid to do what I love, which is gather together cool people to talk about things that matter.
Wow, that's wonderful, wonderful. Jack, in your recent interview with Oprah, I saw you said that success comes from fulfilling your soul's purpose. I think that's extremely insightful. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, a lot of people think success is making a lot of money. And we all know people that are millionaires and billionaires that are not happy. Yes. We know a lot of people who think success comes from having a lot of power. Most of those people are so afraid of losing their power. I mean, I think, the ex-president of the United States is a good example of that. Their whole identity is wrapped up in, I've got to be in charge or I'm in trouble. And so, but they're not happy. They're suffering from a lot of pain, a lot of fear. And so I believe, as I said, everyone has a purpose. And when you fulfill that purpose, you're happy. I've got 3 children and 2 stepchildren. One of them is a hip hop singer and a DJ, and he has a record studio where he helps people record stuff. He doesn't make a lot of money, but he is extremely happy. Another one's a drummer in a band. He's also a carpenter, and he does carpentry work. He hangs art in people's homes because he's bonded as an art. He can move art around. My youngest son is a singer. Had a lot of difficulty this year because of COVID locking down concerts, but he's also a really good salesperson and loves clothes. So he's been working in a clothing boutique, making about, I probably make $58,000 this year as a side gig that allows him to sing at night. So I think that, you can find the thing that you love to do. And then basically, if you figure out a way to monetize it and just ask who needs what I have, who is similar, who wants to play. I mean, there's a lot of strange music out there that people have followers from all over the world that love that music that I might not like to listen to. There are all these influencers on TikTok, who are out there making money hyping products, saying, I use this skincare product. And so, I mean, if you're really creative, I think you can find a way to do it. When the pandemic hit, I know one person basically was really in trouble. They realized everyone was selling stuff on eBay and Etsy and all these places to make money. And so she started a service where I'll pick up whatever you're selling, I'll box it up and ship it UPS, you pay me for the service. And she made a fortune. Wow. So it's like, I always say, look for a need and fill it that might be related to something you love and care about.
I think it really comes down to how creative we use our mind, isn't it? Rather than look at it just, black and white or in a
right.
And it's a very challenging time in the world right now, Jack. What advice would you give to someone who just lost a job or business and is feeling uncertain about the future?
Well, I think that, certainty is a choice. You can believe that it's all going to work out, or you can believe it's not. And what I always tell people is start with believing that it is going to work out. Start believing that everything in the universe is happening for you, not against you. So many people think when something bad happens, God doesn't love me, the universe is out to get me, I'm so unlucky. But as long as you're thinking that, you're focusing on what you don't want. And the law of attraction, which I happen to believe in, says that what you focus on and feel strongly about, you're going to get more of. So I was coaching a woman today who started to set some financial goals for herself in her financial consulting business. And she had a couple of clients, but then they didn't work out. And she said, I'm just so frustrated. And I said, well, you're focusing on everything that didn't work. The truth is you have a house over your head. You got food in the refrigerator. You have money in the bank. You have other clients potentially lined up that you can sell to. Everything's working for you. But if you focus on the few who got away, you're going to feel miserable. And so start with the belief that it's going to work out, and then ask yourself, what skills do I have? Who needs those skills? Are there skills I don't have that the world needs now that I can learn? In China right now, there's a lot of coal mining going on. I just read about a major, accident that occurred there. But, in West Virginia, where I grew up, there was a lot of coal mining. It became very clear as global warming became an issue and solar power was coming along. Coal mines weren't going to be making as much money. Nobody saw it coming because they weren't looking. They weren't saying, okay, this looks like it's not going to keep working. I better get some other skills. Maybe I need to learn how to manufacture things. Maybe I need to learn some house building skills. Maybe I need to go to a class and learn how to program a computer. And so you've got to be looking at what's needed, and the needs of the society emerge over time. What was needed 25 years ago isn't needed so much. And what's being needed now are more people that can help people with anxiety and stress, which is why we need a lot of coaches, people that can help people deal with, their diets and nutrition, because our immune systems need to be strong. So you have to be paying attention to what the needs are, and then what you love to do that would fit into that.
And Jack, for you personally, what has been some of the biggest challenge and setback in your life, and how did you overcome it, and how did you bounce back from it?
Well, I think, in the long run of my life, my two biggest challenges were I got divorced twice, and that was not fun. And I actually am the one who chose to leave. But the reality was that my ex-wife got all the money, which was millions of dollars. I got to keep my job because they said my company was worth everything she got. So, I was literally wearing my same shirt 3 days in a row and, washing them myself and ironing them and, for a couple of months in the beginning. And that was complicated and challenging. But what I did was I said, okay, I know I can create this again. If I created it once, I can do it again. And I would say to everybody, if you're here listening to this, you have survived everything that ever happened to you. So you've proven that you're a survivor. And so just remember that. And if you look to see what you're challenged with now and believe you can survive it, you will. And the other thing for me is I reached out and asked my publisher if he would give me a little more of an advance so I could keep my house, which he did. I asked other people, how did you get through it? I asked other people if they'd help me market my book, which I wrote, The Success Principles, during that time. And I learned how to be a good enroller and a good seller, something I'd never really mastered up until then, because I never really needed to. But all of a sudden, when you don't have money, if you don't know how to sell something or enroll somebody in something, whether it's your business, your course, your life, whatever, you're not going to succeed. I believe every child should be taught enrollment skills and selling skills. My son, as mentioned, the singer, he's a great salesperson. That's why he's doing well in the boutique he works with selling clothes, which has allowed him to get through the pandemic. And I think the other thing I would say to people is just take action and respond to the feedback. And if you don't know what to do, find someone who's already done something like what you want to do and ask them for their advice. Everyone I've ever asked for advice, with maybe one exception, has been willing to give it to me. And most people are afraid. They're afraid of rejection. And, you cannot be afraid of rejection. I mean, you can be afraid of it, but you can't let it stop you. Because ask, as is one of my major principles. And if you ask people to support you, to give you guidance, to network with you, to be a mentor, join your mastermind group, be an accountability partner, most people are willing to play.
How do people overcome the fear of being rejected? Because I talk to people,
yeah. Sure, it's a big one because most of us got rejected sometime, usually when we were younger. The girl we asked out in high school, the person who didn't go to the prom with us, the job that we first wanted, the college we applied to, the cheerleading squad we tried out for, the football team, whatever. And when you're that young, that rejection stings a lot more. And whenever you have a rejection and you have a big, strong and negative emotional response to it, it locks into the neurons of the brain a lot more powerfully if there's not that big emotional attachment to it. So what happens is it's challenging to overcome. However, what you have to do is realize that if you get a no, if I ask you to do something with me, Joseph, and you don't do it, I didn't have you doing it with me before. I don't have you doing it now. My life didn't get worse. If I ask you to buy my book and you say no, I didn't have you buying my book before. I don't have you buying my book now. True. If I applied to Harvard and I didn't get in, I wasn't in Harvard before I applied. I'm not in Harvard after I applied. And most people spend their whole life not going to Harvard and doing very well. So the reality is to realize it's a numbers game. There's a yes out there somewhere. And, one of the exercises I do in my live trainings, I will ask people to think of 3 things you want. And then I get everyone to stand up. There might be 200-300 people in the room. And I want you to go up to people and say, would you babysit for me so I can write my book? Would you give me $1,000? Would you invest in my foundation? Whatever it might be. And as you're getting asked these things, you have to count 9 no's. So as people come up to me, I'm counting how many no's have I given. On a 10th person, I give a yes. And what people learn from that exercise after doing it for about 30 minutes, they get a lot of no's, but they get 2 or 3 yeses as well. And they can begin to say, oh, I get it. It's a numbers game. Not everyone's going to give me a yes. I only need 1 yes. 144 rejections for Chicken Soup for the Soul, and yet 1 yes changed my life. If I'd given up after 100, where would I be? You wouldn't have asked me to write the foreword to your book. I wouldn't have done it. No one would know who I am. I wouldn't be living in a $6 million home. I wouldn't have spoken in 100 countries around the world. None of that would have ever happened.
So it's more about the flexibility and the resilience in the mind. For an average person, Jack, how can they learn to be more resilient while developing better strategies for the future, like post-pandemic?
Sure. No, I think resiliency is important, and resiliency is an attitude. And resiliency, obviously, it's easier to be resilient if you've had times where you had challenges and you overcame them, then you build confidence. I say self-confidence, which is a part of resilience, comes from surviving a risk. And so if you take risks and you survive them, your self-confidence grows. If I ask someone out for a date and they say yes, I get more confident about doing that. If I ask 10 people and they say no, my confidence might wane a little bit. But you have to remember, again, a friend of mine wrote a book called Go for No. And the idea was, we always tell people in sales, I want you to be committed over the next 2 weeks, get 100 no's. Just go out and get 100 no's. And what, you crazy? You want me to go out and get no's? Yeah, because along the way, someone's going to say yes. And so when you get a no, you don't freak out. You go, oh, I'm closer to a yes. And one of my friends actually teaches people, he says, look, when you get a no, say, thank you for the no. And if people go, what? Well, thank you for the no. What are you, nuts? I just told you I'm not going to do it. I know, and I appreciate that. Well, why would you say thank you? Because my experience is 1 out of every 25 people says yes. So now I'm closer to my yes. So thank you for saying no. And you know what happens? People are so blown away by that half the time. They say, well, wait, talk to me some more about this. Because they're so overwhelmed by your attitude that you didn't freak out and cave in and go away when you got a no. So, most stories we hear about people that are successful, if you go back to the root of things, they had a lot of challenges to overcome, a lot of no's, a lot of failures. Walt Disney went bankrupt 3 times before he built Disneyland. Henry Ford went bankrupt 3 times before Ford Motor Company became a reality. My 144 no's. Starbucks, which you know about, he got 217 rejections, Howard Schultz, before he got a yes to fund Starbucks. And so J.K. Rowling, who did the Harry Potter series, turned down, I think, by 14 publishers, and she had to rewrite every draft to send it to the next one. She couldn't afford to actually go and get it photocopied, so she retyped it.
Wow.
But that's resilience. Why? Because you believe in it. If you believe in your vision, you believe in yourself, you believe in, sometimes it's called, I got to feed my kids. I'm going to do whatever is necessary, and then we find we have resources we don't even know we have.
Mm-hmm. Those are very special people like yourself. But for an average person, Jack, how does one develop more self-confidence in the beginning?
By 2 things: taking small risks. Don't try big ones. Small risks. So invite someone you think will say yes. Don't start with the homecoming queen on your first date. Ask someone that's maybe not quite so beautiful and everyone's chasing after her. Make a small request instead of a big one. But also, and this is probably the most important thing, is we've learned that the body cannot tell the difference between a real event and a vividly imagined event. So you can rehearse taking the actions you're afraid to take, rehearse asking for what you want, rehearse in your mind getting a yes, rehearse people saying, I want to play, rehearse winning the gold medal, rehearse being the salesperson in your mind. Mm-hmm. See it, feel it. What would you feel if that was true? If you sold that car, if you got that job, if that woman said yes, if that person hired you, what would you feel? So now take the time to imagine that, because what average people do is they imagine average results. And average is like getting a lot of no's. And so they stop before they get to the yes. And so what you want to do is imagine the outcome you want. And then what happens is, if you've had a lot of that in your brain, your body thinks like, oh, we can handle that. And, one of my friends went into the bank. It is a normal person, average. And the bank said, we're not going to give you the loan. And she said, can I speak to the board who made this decision? Why? Because I know if they understood how dedicated I am and just didn't see it on paper, they'd say yes. And they were so taken by her attitude, they said, okay, she met with the committee and they gave her a yes. Wow. So you have to start. One of the things we say is certainty sells. If you're certain that you're going to get the job, if you're certain that this person's going to say yes, if you're certain, and it may not be that person that does it, but that certainty puts out a vibration that attracts more of what you want to you. And you're projecting that as you interact with people. And see, here's the other thing about average. I don't believe there's any such thing as average. Mm-hmm. I believe there's incredible people who've not yet stepped up to do the incredible things they're capable of because they're afraid. And fear is just visualizing the thing you don't want to have happen, the rejection, the lack of getting the job, the person saying no. Mm-hmm. Start visualizing the opposite.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's wonderful insights, wonderful insights. From a business perspective, Jack, how do you think leaders can develop strategy to help their people, their employees look after their mental well-being?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to care about their mental well-being. You have to, I think the biggest thing a leader can do is create what I call a safe space. If you feel safe, you're going to be real. You're going to tell me the truth. You're going to be authentic. You're not going to withhold stuff from me as a leader, things I might need to know. If you're afraid, you're not going to give me bad news. If you're afraid, you're going to cover things up. If you're afraid, you're going to hold back your ideas for fear that I'm going to judge them and put you down in front of everyone else. So the main thing in today's world, a lot of people are anxious, they're stressed out, they're distrustful, they're fearful. So I think creating, like we in our company, we start every meeting with having everyone share what's new and good in your life. And then we have what we call a heart talk, where we pass around a heart. It's a beanbag heart. You could use a baseball, it doesn't matter, but some object that people see. And everyone gets 3 or 4 minutes to talk about what's the biggest challenge going on in their life right now. So they feel it's a safe space to bring themselves to the room. And then we also talk about what's the biggest challenge going on for you in business right now in our company. And so, and everybody gets heard. Nobody interrupts anybody. That's the whoever has the heart can talk as, up to like 4 or 5 minutes. and no one can interrupt them. And what happens is people feel safe to be themselves. They feel safe to tell the truth. They feel safe to put out creative ideas. And when people are not in fear, they're creative. When people are in fear, they're protective. And so I think that's the first thing. Secondly, you have to be willing to listen to people. Too many leaders come in and tell you how it's going to be and where we're going to go. And you have to have a vision as a leader, but you have to listen to people, what they're telling you. Be a good listener as well as a good communicator and storyteller, which is also important to do. And I think make people feel appreciated. You know, there was a study done that I reported in one of our books called The Power of Focus. And we interviewed 2,000 entrepreneurs, and we gave them 10 qualities that you would like in a leader. And, it would give you job satisfaction. And all the leaders said it would be high pay and, opportunity for advancement and all that. And all the people that were the employees said, understanding leadership, compassion and energy, letting us in on things, not telling them, well, it's on a need to know basis and you don't need to know. So feeling appreciated was the big thing. And so, leaders need to take time to appreciate people, whether you appreciate them in person. If you've read the 5 love languages or the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace, some people it's quality time, just spending a few minutes with them. How's it going? For other people, it's words of affirmation, telling them they're doing a good job. For someone else, it's acts of service. Hey, can I pick this up for you? For someone else, it's nurturing touch. Give them a hug, give them a high five. It's a little tough today with COVID. And then finally, gifts. Some people, like, you buy them 2 tickets to the baseball game. Wow, the boss really cares about me because he knows I like baseball. So I think that's important. And finally, I would say transparency. Be honest as the boss. If there's challenges, if you have fears, if you have needs, if you're confused, if you're upset, angry, irritable, whatever, be transparent, be congruent, walk your talk, so people can trust you. I think if you do that, people are going to feel like you're an effective leader for them.
I remember that great book of yours, The Power of Focus. There is a hierarchy with different leaders at different stages. From what I remember, I think the top of the hierarchy was something called self-actualization, something along those lines. What is that, and why is it important?
It's been a while since I've talked about that book. I'm not going to be sure I remember it for sure. But when some leaders are working from the position of my job's to be powerful and tell everyone what to do, kind of command and control leadership. And then other people are people that are, they're honest, they're open, they're good communicators, they have a vision. But if you don't create a space of self-actualization for your staff, and if you're not self-actualized yourself, what happens is you're going to have unprocessed needs, limiting beliefs you have. Your ego needs are going to be real important. You don't want to look bad in front of people. You don't want to be challenged. When you have needs like that, you end up creating conflict. You end up putting people down. People don't trust you. So I think, being a self-actualizing leader, being willing to work on yourself and being willing to see, a friend of mine just wrote a book. I forget the exact title, but it was about seeing conflict in the workplace as an opportunity for growth. You both have something that you're bumping up against. And instead of like having a win-lose situation, both people going and saying, okay, what is it in my past that's making me get triggered by this person? Maybe it's my dad never listened to me and now this person's not listening to me. And so I'm plugged in and, so if we can use the tools we have to be conscious, because we're committed to self-actualization and growth, then what happens is we both grow from that. And then we get better solutions. We're back in harmony together, and we create a space where we know it's safe to do that. And then the whole organization grows as opposed to becomes fractionated into cliques and to factions that are warring with each other, which happens all way too often.
Jeff, from your point of view, what's the top 5 qualities of a self-actualized leader?
Well, I would say, it's easy to say love. Love's a difficult word for a lot of people because it's been so misused and so forth. But I think having goodwill, compassion, caring, empathy for people, I think is really important. There are times when you love people and you might have to fire them because they're not doing the job. It's not the right mix for them. They're in the wrong position, like a square peg in a wrong hole. And it's for their best interest to move on. And for the best interest of the company that we have someone in this role that can do the job. So it doesn't mean being codependent, but I think, coming from a place of caring for from the customer, for the vendors, for the staff, for everybody, caring about it, and caring for the environment now too. We talk about, 3 bottom lines, the environment being one of them, global warming, things like that. I think another thing is being a visionary, I think is important. You have to hold the vision and be able to see the vision, create the vision. I think inclusivity is important, meaning don't just come in and say, this is it. We may get there, but get other people, inclusion. Like, what do you guys see? Where do we want to go? There's a lot of books being written now about what is the natural organizational unfoldment of this organization rather than just one person's vision. Sometimes what the organization needs to do to grow isn't exactly the one thing that one person's pushing for, because there's other things that are emerging that maybe other people are seeing that's not there. I think, as I said, I think being a good listener is really important. Mm-hmm. And I think a good storyteller, because stories enroll people, stories motivate people, both the clients, the marketplace, your brand building, and also the people you're enrolling in your company to do the job. And again, I would say appreciation. I see way too many leaders, I'm paying them, they're supposed to do this, and in the process, a lot of people quit or they feel unhappy. We know that in America, 60% of people are not in a job they love.
Wow.
And that's not good. I think it was Thomas Edison said, when your vocation feels like a vacation, meaning you love your work, then you've made it. And I think companies, yeah. And when people look forward to going to work and they look forward to being with their peers, and they look forward to serving the customers, and they look forward to the joy of being in that position, everything wins. Tony Hsieh, who started Zappos shoes, what an amazing place, what a great community. People love working there and they make a fortune, so it's all good.
Mm. And Jack, what are your morning and daily routines? Do you meditate every day?
I do indeed. Here's the deal. For me, I am a meditator. I teach something I call the hour of power. You may have seen me write about that, but basically for me, it's 20 minutes of meditation. And I would say the last 3 to 4 minutes of that are my gratitude exercises, my affirmations, and my visualization. And something I've added recently is sending love. I take about 30 seconds to a minute and I send love to somebody. And I'm focusing now on people I don't like that much. And so, if there's a political figure or, someone who I think wronged me or my wife or something I read about in the news, can I send them love? Because it's hurting me if I'm not in a state of love. And I do think that we actually can influence the world when we send more love out there. So that's like, I meditate. I think of 3 things that I'm grateful for that are average things, and 3 things I'm going to experience that day that I'm looking forward to be grateful for. Like looking forward to our interview tonight was one of mine this morning. And then I do some yoga, some stretching, some qigong, or working on a Pilates, but something that stretches the muscles out. I do a few breathing exercises. I go for a 20-minute walk. Sometimes I do a little weightlifting at the end of that. I have a home gym and a converted garage. And when I'm walking, I listen to self-help audios. Right now, I'm listening to Abraham Hicks, the Law of Attraction teachers, that were part of why The Secret got written, that book. And then I'll read something uplifting. Right now, I'm reading John Assaraf's book called Inner Size, like the idea of exercise. We also have inner size. And then I do a smoothie with, fresh pressed vegetable juices, protein powder, collagen, cinnamon, blueberries, ningxia, which is goji berries from Ningxia, China. Which are high in their oxidative, reactive. They kill off free radicals in the body. I take about 40 supplements to keep my body young and healthy and COVID free. And I take a shower, go through my emails. And by 10 o'clock, I'm either running a seminar, a mastermind group, a coaching program, or clients. And at the nighttime, I do my affirmations again. I do 3 more gratitudes of things I didn't expect to happen during the day that I'm grateful for, and my visualization. And I usually meditate for about 5 minutes just to totally unwind. And then I go to bed around 10:30, 11 o'clock.
Wow, that's very incredible and insightful routines. I'll follow that. We touched on this a little bit earlier before when you talk about how you came up with the name Chicken Soup for the Soul. This is on intuition.
Sure.
What is intuition and how do we tap into that for an average person?
Well, there are three kinds of ways of perceiving: auditory, visual, kinesthetic.
Mhm.
And smell would be another one. But for most of us, it's we either hear something, we see something, or we feel something. And what I've discovered over the years, because I do teach about intuition, is that, everybody has a different way they tune into theirs. Some people, when they have a thought, like, when I thought about chicken soup for the soul, I got goosebumps. And some people, the hair on the back of their neck stands up. Some people get an expansive feeling in their chest. When something's negative, they get a contractive feeling, or they feel their body move down, or their stomach get a weird feeling in the pit of their stomach. So that's a physical sensation. Other people, you close your eyes and you can say, okay, higher power, or whatever you are referring to in your religious or ecumenical background, and you would say, I need some guidance on what would be the best thing to do today, or I've got this conflict and I'm not sure which way to go. And sometimes for me, when I do that, I'll see an image, like I'll get a visual, like the Chicken Soup for the Soul chalkboard, or I'll see two opportunities in front of me, and one of them starts to wane and become small, or it goes into distance. One will move forward to me. So it's a visual kind of knowing. Sometimes you'll hear a song playing during the day and you can't get that song out of your head. And then you realize that song is really the answer to your question. Sometimes, we just can't get a certain lyric out of our mind, or we're in this bookstore and this one book pops out of us and it's the title or the theme of it's answering our question. So there's a lot of ways that answers come to us if we pay attention. And I think meditation for me is so valuable because it's a time when I'm quiet enough to really listen. And so whether it comes as a visual or me interacting with a higher power verbally, having a conversation. Some people do automatic writing where they'll just ask a question and start to write, like in a journal. And as they're writing, the answer will come. Sometimes people will even report like it feels like someone's writing through them. So I think there's different ways to do it, but the main thing is to set aside time to give your intuition, which we call the still small voice within, enough silence where you can hear it or pay attention to it.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Jack, for someone who would like to make a positive change in the world, what advice would you give?
Well, I think you have to ask yourself, what is the positive change I want to make? And then I think whatever it is, you have to model it in your own life. If you want people to be more loving, you have to be more loving in your life. If you want people to be more ecologically sustainable, you want to model that. And then I always tell people, create the life you want. My friend Mark Victor Hansen, my co-author on Chicken Soup, asked the Dalai Lama once, he said, what's the best thing I can do for poor people? Because he wanted to make a difference to helping end poverty. And the Dalai Lama, which surprised me, said, don't be one of them, which I thought was pretty interesting because he was saying, be a model of someone who makes their life work, show them that it's possible. Both Mark and I came from very humble backgrounds. My dad made $8,000 a year. That's 8 with just 3 zeros. And Mark's was very similar. I think his father was a butcher, I think. And, we went on to become multimillionaires. And the idea is that I grew up, my dad was kind of anti-rich people, kind of a union mentality. Mm-hmm. And I had to learn that rich people weren't bad, that rich people have more money to do good things. Are there people that have money that do evil things? Yes. Are there a lot of people that have money to do great things? Absolutely. And as Bob Proctor says, if you don't have any money, the good you can do is limited to your physical presence, what you can do with your body. But if I have money, I can build schools in Africa. I can feed people in India. I can support orphanages in China. I can do all kinds of good things because I have that income. And so I think, one thing is just live the life you're asking people to live. And I would say the other thing is a lot of people that want to make a difference are mad about the way it is. They're angry that people are not, recycling. They're angry that people are, polluting. They're angry that people are not more loving. They're angry that people are abusing people in factories and so forth. And I think whenever you're angry at something, you're putting out a negative vibe and you're pushing. And if I had you in a seminar now, I'd say, put your hands up and you'd put your hands up, and I would push on them, and 99 times out of 100, the person will push back.
Mm.
And it's your nature when someone pushes on you to want to push back.
Mm.
So whenever you attack somebody and say you're bad, your side shouldn't be doing what it's doing, my initial reaction is to defend myself. And I'll hire lawyers to defend myself. I'll hire, brand managers to defend my brand when it's polluting and doing bad things. So if I come from love, and I love you, and I love the environment, and I love other people working in mines, children being abused, whatever. If I come from love, then it's much easier for people to hear me. It's much easier to enroll people. And so I think that's a really important thing. And then study what works. A lot of people are out there and they write things about it, but they're not out there doing anything about it. Not that writing isn't important. We want to get the ideas out there. But I always tell people, if you don't like the education system, quit fighting the schools, go create an alternative school. Create one that works the way you'd like to see it work. Vishwan Lakiani, do you know who he is at Mind Valley? He's creating an alternative education system for higher education right now, where kids would graduate from school and actually have money instead of loan debt, where they would have actually created the business while they're in school. It's a total flip-flop of the old paradigm where you're just learning something that in today's world, half the things you're learning, you can't even sell it to anybody. Google now is saying you don't need a college degree. We just need to know if you can program or not.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Wow. And Jack, what's your personal aspiration for the world? And what kind of legacy would you like to leave behind?
Well, I would like to see everyone living in love and harmony. I would like to see everyone cooperating. Right now, we have people living in fear and divisiveness. We all have this belief there's only so many goods in the world, so many resources, and our job is to fight over them. So you got countries fighting over oil, you got countries fighting over water, you got people within countries fighting over different resources. I believe there's enough resources if we shared them, if we used them intelligently, if we recycled appropriately and, practice conservation, and there's enough. But what happens is when people are scared and when people don't feel they're worthy of love, joy, success, and fulfillment, they then get into trying to manipulate things and manipulate people rather than cooperating and collaborating. And so I want to see a world where people operate out of that love and support and caring for each other, believing that we can win. One of the people I work with right now, we're working on a world peace project. The thing we say when people talk to each other is the question we should have is, how can we create a solution where you and your people get what they need and my people get what they need for now and for a long time into the future together? We've got countries that are landlocked that can't get to the sea, but if we could provide them with a railroad to the sea, they wouldn't have to fight the other country to try to take them over to get that. It wouldn't be that difficult to produce that reality, sharing water, etc. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, I want a world where people are psychologically sophisticated, where we see that most of the things we're doing that create conflict are wounds, are beliefs that are false, illusionary from our wounded childhoods, and that we have the power to stop doing that, create good parenting, good education, and people know how to heal them, as we were talking about before. When you get into these conflicts in the organizations, that people know there's a way through that. Most people are psychologically ignorant, so we need to have education working. And that's why I'm training thousands of teachers and trainers. We've now trained 4,500 people to teach the success principles. We're in 117 countries with certified trainers. And we're also developing a whole school program now. We'll be testing it this year in both India and the United States. And by 2022, after we get the research, we'll be able to roll that out to the world. And so those are the things I want to see happen. And, obviously I want everyone to read my book because I think it's good. I want people to read the Chicken Soup books because they're going to inspire you to be more loving and kind and all of that. And books like the Success Principles. So if you apply the principles, your life will work. Guaranteed. Principles always work if you always work the principles. Most people are ignorant of the principles.
You're a great man, Jack. You have such a big heart and a big vision for the world. I really, really appreciate who you are as a person and what you did for the world. And in closing, do you have any last parting words?
Well, one self-serving. I'd like everyone to go to my website, jackcanfield.com. And if you go there, one thing you can get, if you do jackcanfield.com/transformation, we will send you for 10 days, a little lesson every day to your cell phone, your iPad, your computer, And it's about a 3-minute video of one of my principles, and it gives you a little homework assignment to do through the day. You can also find out about all our courses and our training programs and all of that. So jackcanfield.com/transformation. The other thing I would say is I believe if you're listening to this, it's because you want more of something. You want more happiness, more energy, more health, more freedom. Maybe you want more free time for your family, more connection with people, more love, more impact in your work, more money, more success, whatever it might be, you want more. And if there's something you want less of, like less pain, less loneliness, the opposite is you want more connection, more joy in your body. So after teaching live in almost 100 countries around the world, teaching virtually in probably 200, and working with hundreds of thousands of people, I can tell you this: if you have a desire in your heart, you have the capacity to make it come true.
Wow.
I'm totally convinced you can't have that dream if you don't have the ability to make it come true. It just won't occur to you. Now, here's the deal. You may have to learn something new. You may have to grow yourself, develop new qualities, new skills, collaborate with people, get some certifications, degrees you don't have, whatever it might be. But if you can dream it, you can do it. And as my friend Bob Proctor says, if you can hold it in your mind, you can hold it in your hands. It's just a matter of making the commitment to do the work to get there. But you do it because you believe it's possible. And it is, I promise you.
Wow, Jack, that's extremely powerful. Thank you for sharing. Once again, thank you for your time today. And thank you so much for your guidance and friendship and wisdom over the last 12 years. And it's great to have you here, and it's an honor. Thank you, Jack.
Well, it's my pleasure, Joseph. You're one of the bright lights in the universe. And anytime I can help you, I'm glad to do it.
Thank you, Jack.
Take care, my friend.